Before Augusto Pinochet even took power, the Nixon administration saw Chile as a challenge it had to address. Chile had set a precedent in 1970 when its people made Salvador Allende the first Marxist president ever freely elected in Latin America. National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger reportedly said, "I don't see why we need to stand idly by and watch a country go communist due to the irresponsibility of its own people." Now declassified U.S. government documents show that Washington did not stand by. It drastically cut U.S. assistance to Chile, blocked other international aid, and spent millions of dollars covertly to undermine Allende. The CIA also sent a secret cable to its station chief in Santiago. Now declassified, it told him it is firm and continuing policy that Allende be overthrown by a coup. The U.S. ambassador was instructed to approach selected military leaders. They would be given to understand that their involvement in a coup would not jeopardize American military assistance. And on a date that would eventually be meaningful to Americans for a very different reason, the military struck on September 11th, 1973.
The United States, we know from declassified records, did not participate directly in the coup of September 11th, 1973, but it was the U.S. effort to create the conditions for that coup, to create the justification, the instability that would hasten that coup. Those are the efforts that the United States took.
Allende died in the coup, the first of thousands of deaths in the years that followed. From the start, Washington was supportive of the military junta, even when it was clear that it was carrying out widespread arrests and killings. Within weeks, the United States sent millions of dollars in aid, and Kissinger, by then Secretary of State, told those around him, "I think we should understand our policy, that however unpleasant they act, the government is better for us than Allende was." Over the years, as thousands of Chileans disappeared or were killed, that remained Washington's policy.
Augusto Pinochet's name became synonymous with human rights violations in the 1970s and 1980s. And the United States had a hand in that, frankly.
Decades later, Secretary of State Colin Powell said, "It is not part of American history that we're proud of." Jonathan Mann, CNN reporting.
All right, we have to take a short break now, but when we come back, the new face of Chile and the Pinochet legacy. Do stay with us. Pinochet's death marks the end of a dark era for Chilean politics for many, including the country's current president. Michelle Bachelet was imprisoned for her beliefs under Pinochet. Her father also died after being tortured in prison. Bachelet recently said it would violate her conscience to attend a state funeral for the former dictator. Welcome back. So, hero or murderer? How will history view this man who has divided his country both in life and in death? A man whose legacy is still hotly debated decades after he was swept to power in a violent coup. We turn now to Bruce Douglas for some answers. He's the assistant editor of Latin American newsletter. Thanks so much for talking with us. How inevitable do you think it is then that we'll see this divided legacy of Augusto Pinochet?
Well, I think it will continue for a while. At the present, Chile's politics, although it is a stable country which models itself very much on other small nations like New Zealand, there is still quite a fractious political atmosphere, and part of President Bachelet's responsibilities as president will be unpicking some of the legacies, some of the constitutional legacies that Augusto Pinochet left behind.
Now, one of the former dictator's 5 children, Marco Antonio Pinochet, said, "Maybe not today, but as time passes, I believe my father will take the place he deserves in the history of Chile." How likely is that, do you think?
Well, I think he's always going to be a controversial figure, and I think it very much depends on whether historians prioritise economic success or respect for human rights. I think undoubtedly Chile is a sort of poster child of the neoliberal economists of the Chicago School, but at the same time its success, the opening of its economy, which has paved the way to it being one of the more prosperous societies in Latin America, came at a terrible human cost of at least 3,000 people murdered and tens of thousands tortured and hundreds of thousands forced into exile.
Now, a lot of people are asking whether his death will mark the end of the investigation of those crimes committed during his dictatorship. How likely is it, do you think?
I think there will be a lot of political impetus to carry on investigating those crimes. Isabel Allende, the daughter of Salvador Allende, who's now a deputy for Bachelet's own Partido Socialista, said today that she was very keen that these cases should continue. And I think without Pinochet, funnily enough, it may be easier to get the judicial processes pushed through, and we may have an opportunity to uncover some of the abuses of the past.
Was it the right decision, do you think, to deny him a state funeral, as most former presidents, of course, are given that honour?
Yes, well, I think the situation has changed recently with the revelations that he had been stealing from the country. There's supposed to be around $27 million stashed away in secret bank accounts throughout the world. And I think that cost him a lot of support, even among his most enthusiastic supporters, which meant that it was increasingly untenable for President Bachelet, who, as your report earlier stated, was tortured under Pinochet, to allow such a state funeral to go ahead.
Oh, just very quickly, does the death of Pinochet mark a new beginning, do you think, now for Chile?
I think it does. I think now that he, as a person, is out of the way, perhaps it's possible to address the subject with less of an emotional aspect to it. And I think possibly we could see more reconciliation between the two strands of Chilean ideology.
And do you think at the funeral, of course, tomorrow, that could put to bed some of the problems, or do you think we're going to see possibly supporters and those against him vying for a little while to come?
I think tomorrow could be quite an emotional day in Chile. I suspect there will be some protests. Every September the 11th in Chile, the anniversary of their coup, is always marked by a certain low-level violence and demonstrations. And I think we'll see the same tomorrow, but I suspect it will die down after that.
All right. Bruce Douglas, thanks so much for talking with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of Inside. I'm Rosemary Church. Stay with us.